We're live. Hello. Welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I'm Brandon Tessers. I am a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy for very, very, very many reasons. This is instead just an open conversation. I'm here chatting with you all, whoever you are. I'm doing my best to make my guesses about who you are, whether you're watching this live or watching this later as VOD on YouTube or wherever. I'm doing my best to make my guesses about who you are, what you're interested in, how I'm coming across to you, how I'm impacting you. For those of you who are willing and able to participate in the chat, I appreciate that because it gives me a lot more information on which to base my guesses about who you are and what you're interested in and how I'm impacting you and so on. I will do my best to read out comments from the chat as they come in because we are live streaming on 3 different platforms simultaneously. We're on YouTube, Facebook, and YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. Yeah. And each person will only see comments that are entered in through the platform you're on. If you're on Twitch, you'll only see comments from Twitch. So I read them out so that people on all platforms know, we're all on the same page. I work with a therapy practice called Effective Artistry. Our physical office is located in Northbrook, Illinois. We do individual, couples, family, and group therapy work with people in the states of Illinois and Wisconsin. We also work with a few coaches who can work with people all over the world via the internet. All of our coaches are trained as executive functioning coaches, but they all have additional specialties as well: professional business coaching, parenting coaching, creativity and artistry coaching. Please don't hesitate if the impulse strikes you to say something, to put something into the chat. Please don't worry about whether it's on topic. Don't wait for a break in the conversation or worry about taking us down a different direction. That's how conversations work. Everything we pay attention to impacts what we think and what we feel and what we do next. When people are having a conversation, they're paying attention to one another. So what I'm saying impacts what you think and feel and do. What you say impacts what I think and feel and do next. We go wherever we go. And frankly, I'd rather talk about whatever you're interested in than whatever else I was talking about anyway. I think that's mostly it. Margaret Schaus, who sometimes is with us, who is unfortunately not able to join today. Hopefully we'll have her try again soon. So it'll just be me. Top of mind right now, because I was just having a conversation about it before coming and setting up for the stream. It's funny because I'm saying top of mind, but actually right now I'm feeling scattered. It's not the right word, but like noticing my tea that I brought up and steeping. Had to kind of like willfully access an idea of what to talk about rather than just saying what was the first thing that came on my mind. Although I was just thinking about this right beforehand. Talking about we all have to do our best. We all do our best to make determinations about when to rely on our thoughts and when to rely on the environment around us. That's not the most clear way of saying this. Look, sometimes you see something and you think, oh, that's a good thing to eat, and you eat it. Sometimes you see something and you think, oh, that's not a good thing to eat, and you don't eat it, right? In either case, we're relying on our interpretation, our thoughts, our assessment of what's going on there. Other times, somebody's saying to us, like, hey, this is good to eat, and we have a thought that it's good to eat, and we go. Other times, we have a thought that it's bad to eat, and someone's saying to us that it's good to eat, and we eat it anyway. That's what I'm trying to get at, is that sometimes our thoughts, our interpretation, our assessment of things is different from what other people are presenting to us, or sometimes even different than what we are directly observing. And we have to make our determinations about when to go by what. I'm going to focus more specifically on just when it's the difference between what our thought or interpretation of something is versus what someone else is stating to us directly. A lot of what we're going to talk about does also apply to like if I look outside and I see that there is no rain, but I think that it's raining, then I either am not going to go outside, or I'll plan on getting wet, or I'll bring an umbrella or whatever if I do. that's an example of going with like my thoughts and interpretation over my direct observation of the environment. But that's a much more, what's observation, what's perception, what's interpretation, is a very like nuanced, uh, maybe even arbitrary is not the right word. Whatever. We're not going to talk about that today, even though what we are going to talk about applies to a lot of that. I could have simplified that a lot better. What I'm focused on for right now is effectively one version of what we mean when we say trust. Because when we talk about trusting people, we mean a lot of different things. As with almost any of these concepts that are constructs, ideas that like labels for things that we've invented, right? Trust is a human concept. There's not something that you can point at that exists that we can detect with auditory or visual or whatever sense data. Trust is an idea. And of course there are like things that you can see that we could say that's what trust looks like, but that's still not what we mean when we say trust. In the same way that you could say like, oh, love is like that person taking care of that person. Now that's love. The love part, that's still a construct. That's still a concept we're applying. What's observable is that person doing that thing. You could even describe it as that person taking care of that person. We're describing the actions being taken. By calling it love, we're saying that that's an example of this concept, or that's evidence that there is love here, whatever we mean by that concept. Same thing with trust. You can't point at something and, like before we humans invented the concept of trust, it's not like we ran into something, saw something, heard something, whatever, and like we're like, whoa, what is this? We have no way to label this. We better come up with something. Like we didn't have to invent the concept of a rock. It's just there. Until we have a word to conceptualize it and discuss it, it is what it is. But eventually we label it, but it still was there anyway. Without the concept of trust, there's nothing that we would like run into or encounter where we're like, this thing that exists, what is this? So constructs generally, they get used a lot of different ways. One way I think is useful to talk about trust is that when we are trusting people in terms of like whether we will defer to them, whether we will rely on them, like structure our day or our life or our actions around the idea that we can rely on them to do some particular thing, that in that case, what we're talking about is two components to that trust. One is we have to trust that that person is intending to do that, that's what they're, we trust that they do want to or intend to or mean to do that thing. We also have to trust their capability. So often in my line of work, obviously, a lot of this comes up with trusting people to help us. And in order to hear something that somebody is saying and internalize that and work on that as though it is something which will genuinely be helpful to you, you have to trust that that person is actually trying to help you, that that's what they're wanting to do. And you have to trust that they also are able to. Oftentimes people want to help and are trying to help, but whatever they're saying or doing isn't actually helpful. But right now, in trust, what I'm talking about is treating it as though what another person says is true, even if it's different from what your assessment or your idea or your interpretation might be, right? So if, I guess this is the example that popped into my mind first, I used it already. If there's something on my plate and I'm like, ooh, that's bad to eat, I shouldn't eat that. And then somebody is saying, no, you should eat it. If I eat it, I am acting as though what they're saying is true, is that it would be good for me to eat it, or at least it won't be bad for me to eat it. If I don't eat it, I am acting as though what I think is true, that it would be bad for me to eat this, right? And we can do either. And sometimes we do one, and sometimes we do the other. And a lot of this has to do with that person, right? Back to the idea of someone helping me. I got to trust that they actually are intending to help me. If I think that this person might be trying to poison me, then no, I'm not going to eat the thing, right? But if I think that they're actually trying to help me, they're saying that it's medicine that will make me feel better. And I also trust that they have the information, the knowledge, the ability to be helpful to me, then that might influence, that likely is going to influence me to act as though what they're saying is true, even if it doesn't seem true to me. Man, I'm trying to separate things out, but I think I'm only making them seem even more entwined. Let's try and step back and just focus on acting as though something is true. I can think that something is not true and still act as though it is, right? And it's important. I'm trying very hard because it is important that we separate those two ideas out. There is believing something, and then there is acting as though it is true. Now, if you believe something is true, the default is that you will act as though it is true. Unless you use conscious thought and will, like effortfully choose, make yourself do differently, we default to acting as though the things that we believe are true are true. We do the things that it would make sense to do if it was true that the thing we believe is true. But we can override when we think that things aren't true. Like, let's say that I am talking to someone and they say that they are happy. Oh, hi. There's a comment there. Hi. They tell me they're happy, but I'm interpreting them and being like, I think they're mad. And they say, no, I'm not mad. I'm great. Now, I can't force myself to believe that their statement is true, right? I might believe it. I might not. I might not believe it and think that I should be like, what's wrong with me? I should believe them. But that doesn't mean I can make myself believe them. I can, however, make myself act as though what they're saying is true. And so this is the particular thing that I was thinking about and talking about before the stream started today. Oh, Northbrook Public Library. I don't know if that's mirrored or not. I suppose it is, bro. I see it mirrored. I'm not sure if you all do, but I think you do. That's the particular thing I was talking about, is acting as though what another person is saying is true, even if you don't believe it. I talk to people about this a lot, especially this is often very relevant when you're talking about therapy, coaching often too, but therapy especially, that it's important that we act as though what the client is saying is true. We can't actually make it so that we believe. And in fact, it's quite important that we sometimes don't believe. We need to rely on our judgment. Otherwise, what's the point of us being there, right? But we can think, that doesn't seem right to me. I think they might be misrepresenting or misinterpreting or misremembering or whatever. It's important to be able to think that and also be able to act as though what they're stating is true. That doesn't mean that we should always act as though what someone else is saying is true. We definitely shouldn't, not even in the case of being a therapist, although we don't need to get super detailed into like that specific thing. Because my guess is that I'm not talking to a bunch of therapists who are all like training and developing into being even better therapists. The point is to be able to make decisions about when it is useful to act as though what someone else is saying is true, and when it's better to act as though your interpretation is true, even when it's different from what they're saying. As a general rule, you should always default to acting as though what a person is saying is the truth, regardless of whether you believe it, when they are talking about their own experience, when they're doing what we call self-report, which means anything inside of a person's what we would call subjective internal experience, inside of your consciousness. You think I'm not a therapist? Smart, I'm definitely not. My day is like so built around therapy at this point. Like these concepts and these things that we talk about, I've explored them in a lot of different capacities, but for the past few years now, I run this practice, Effective Artistry, and we've grown. We have so many therapists that like the bulk of my day is spent supervising, training, developing therapists. So I'm like very focused in on the specific ways of talking about these things that are useful or important for therapy. Sometimes I need to remind myself that that's not what everybody's doing. So anything that's in your consciousness, right? We would call that your subjective internal experience. It's honestly like legitimately very difficult to define what any of this means. There's like entire essays, books, almost fields basically of philosophy where people are trying to explore this. Like, what is it to be conscious? That's some kind of categorical distinction between something which is conscious and something which is not conscious. And the phrase that I've heard used as like the most clear thing, which is ridiculous, is to be conscious means that it is like something to be that thing, which is just a funny way of saying like that thing has an experience. It is aware. It sees, feels, thinks, sees, feels in the conscious sense, the cognitive sense, not the visual sense. Basically, my experience, your experience, what each of us is talking about when we're talking about conscious experience is something that only I can observe. Nobody else can. Now, a lot of that is built off of things that other people can observe. There's, I'm holding this tea mug. At least in theory, other people can also see this tea mug, right? Now, the actual like image, idea, perception I have in my mind of the tea mug, that's only I can see that. But other people can have their own, perceptions or images or symbols representing the tea mug when they look at it. Those things, like the tea mug, those things that multiple people can observe, we call that stuff empirical, right? That I can see the tree, you can also see the tree. But everything in my mind, everything in your mind, all of my emotions, all of my thoughts, only I can observe those things. You can only be aware of those by me sharing those things with you. Now, you can speculate about it, right? You can observe what I'm doing or how my face looks and come to a conclusion of, I think he's angry. That's good that we do that. It's important that we do that. It's a integral human skill. Call it nonverbal communication, but we can even go beyond just like the actual reading of cues. I can think about someone that I'm not even directly observing right now. I can think about, oh, you know what, so-and-so, I bet they're really happy right now because they just had they're having their birthday party tonight. So they're probably having a good time, right? We can just purely speculate. But to be aware, to know what it is, the only way that I have access to that is the extent to which somebody else tells me. If you tell me you're mad, that's the only way I can be aware that you're mad. Otherwise, I can think of it as I'm aware, I know that you're mad, I can tell that you're mad. But really what I'm doing is I'm speculating that you are mad. So that kind of stuff, whenever you're telling people about stuff that only you can observe, we call that self-report. You're talking about your thoughts, your feelings, you're reporting that stuff that is part of yourself or happening in yourself or to yourself. You're reporting that to other people. Now, people can lie about that, right? We all have, we know that people do, that you're mad and you're like, no, I'm fine. I'm not mad, but you are mad, right? We all know that. And so again, important and non-optional for us all that we have other ways of interpreting things. That's baked into our communication. Sometimes the way we communicate, saying, for example, I'm not mad, I'm fine. Sometimes that statement is selected, not consciously necessarily, although sometimes yes. But even if not consciously, sometimes that statement is selected relying on the idea that the other person will still be able to interpret that you are in fact mad, or at least have questions about whether you are. And saying it in that way is intended to, again, sometimes consciously, but often not consciously. It serves the purpose of drawing a person's attention to how you're feeling even more. Now, sometimes people say something like that, and they actually are trying to, and sometimes even succeed at, getting people not to pay as much attention. No, I'm fine. But in order to do that, for the most part, all your communication has to be congruent, right? If you're like, no, I'm not mad, then people might think, oh, okay, and pay less attention. But if you're like, no, I'm not mad, then they pay even more attention because they're getting mixed messages, right? As a general rule of thumb, so this is what I'll say is definitively true. I'm backing off the general rule of thumb here for a minute. This is definitively true. Each individual person is the final authority on their own subjective internal experience. In other words, This to me is like the number one tenet of what I consider to be neurodiversity affirming work. If you're, whatever you're doing, if you're doing it in a neurodiversity affirming way, to me, the number one most important thing that must be true in order for that statement to be true is that an individual's self-report is overrides all other means of gathering information about that person. So that doesn't mean don't try to get information otherwise. That, again, wouldn't even be possible. You automatically are reading people and coming to conclusions or getting ideas about what they might be thinking or feeling or wanting or trying to do or whatever. It means that whenever we do anything like that, we can utilize that until and unless they give self-report that is contradictory. If we say to someone, "Oh, you're depressed," and they're like, "No, I'm not depressed. I'm happy. I'm chill, whatever." Then no matter what it might look like on our side, we still act as though that's true. Because sometimes we're wrong, right? Sometimes I swear you're angry, but you're not. And even though you're saying, "I'm not angry," and it seems to me to be very clear that you are, sometimes you're not, and I just read you that way. That happens honestly more often than people, I think, realize, maybe more often than people are comfortable understanding. And in the other cases where I'm not wrong. I think you're angry and you are actually angry, but you're saying you're not angry. Well, in those cases, it's still, you have the right to tell me whether you're angry or not, right? Let's assume, and I think this statement is accurate, but let's assume that it is true that some people are better at reading other people than other people are, right? Like that two people could be interacting with the same person and that person saying, "I'm not angry." And one of the people's like, "Ooh, I think they are angry." And the other person's like, "Oh, okay, they're not angry." And that person actually is angry, right? That's possible. It is possible for two different people to read somebody and one of them to get an accurate read and one of them to get an inaccurate read, right? So if we assume that this is some kind of a skill, that some people are just better at reading other people, then that's, I'm pausing to measure my language a little bit. I am making a conscious effort to be more deliberate in how I communicate certain kinds of things. I want to say more about that, but we don't need to say more about that right now. But now I don't remember what I was saying before. Oh man. Let's back up. Okay. Oh, skill. Let's say that it is a skill to read people, right? We generally would say like, "Oh, that's good. That's a useful skill to be able to tell when somebody is lying," right? Again, there's a reason that we all do this. It is actually inherently beneficial to be able to determine when a person is misrepresenting the truth, right? It's not good for a person to have no ability to distinguish when a person is lying or telling the truth. Now, what we're doing there is useful. Again, it's still a flawed and limited thing. We can think that they're lying and it turns out that they're telling the truth. Just like on the other end, we can think that someone is telling the truth when it turns out they're lying. Someone who is naive and believes everything even when people are lying, that there are downsides to that, right? But someone who is disbelieving, jaded, cynical, someone who is disbelieving of everyone, thinking that everyone is lying even when they're telling the truth, is making a different mistake, but in the same category of mistakes. What we're all trying to do is to be able to accurately, as best way, we'll accurately assess, is this person telling the truth or not? We all make mistakes, and sometimes we think they are when they aren't, and sometimes we think they aren't when they are. But some people, they make those mistakes in one direction more than the other, and it can get extreme. Some people, we would generally culturally call naive, make the mistake of believing someone saying the truth when they aren't, like constantly never really think that someone is lying when they're actually telling the truth. Some people only make the mistake of thinking someone's lying when they're actually telling the truth, never make the mistake of believing someone when they shouldn't. We're exaggerating, but either way, the further you get from the balance of accurately being able to do it, the worse off you are. But let's say that it's a skill, being able to do that accurately, suss out what somebody's actually thinking or feeling, come up with your speculation, but it turns out that your speculation is accurate or at least useful some high percentage of the time. In that case, then it becomes like almost an ethical question. Do you have the right to know what people don't want you to know about their own internal experience? So remember, we said, you're saying you're not angry. I think you're angry. Either I'm wrong, in which case it would definitely be better for me to act as though you're telling the truth because you are, or I'm right and you are actually angry and you're saying you're not angry, in which case it's still better for me to act as though, in certain contexts, it's still better for me to act as though you're telling the truth because I don't have the right to be able to look in your, just because I can doesn't mean that it's my right to say, no, you're lying. You have the right to lie. Again, I said certain context because that's where this all gets confusing, right? It's important for us to be able to tell when people are lying because sometimes people lie in order to cause us harm. Or even if that's not why, sometimes people lie in a way that can cause us harm or can even cause them harm, right? Every parent knows times where a kid has lied about something because they think they might be in trouble or they don't want to be in trouble, whatever. But the thing that they're lying about is actually really bad for them, not just that they're in trouble. When someone says, eat this food, it'll be good for you, and they're actually trying to poison you, it's really important that you be able to tell the difference. But when we're talking about self-report, that's rarely the case, right? Not never, again, not never, but as a default general rule of thumb, if someone is telling you about how they feel or what they think or what they intend or what they're trying to do, you are better off acting as though what they're saying is true, even if you don't believe it. You can't make yourself believe it, but you can make yourself act in the way that you would if it was true. Right? I'm looking outside, it's not raining. I don't believe that it's raining. There's no way I could believe that it's raining. I'm looking, there's no rain. But I could still act as if it's raining by grabbing an umbrella and putting it up as I walk outside, right? So I can act as if it is true that you're not angry, even if you actually are, and even if I can tell that you actually are. The only exceptions to that is when it genuinely, and this happens, is when it genuinely is bad for a person that they are obfuscating or choosing not to reveal what they're thinking or feeling. Again, that happens. And again, we're all doing our best to try and suss out, is this one of those times where it's I should push and say no, I think you're lying, or, however you want to communicate about it because you think it would be better for them to talk through it. But you want to be really careful about doing that. Again, mostly that's rare. And more importantly, pushing someone, treating them as though they're lying about their self-report when they actually are telling the truth is going to be much worse both for you and for them than the other mistake, treating them as though they're telling the truth when they're lying about a self-report, generally. Same with the other decision we're talking about here, that if this is something that you would benefit from talking about truthfully, and I fail to do that, that's generally going to be a lot better than if I push or try to force you to talk about something that doesn't benefit you. Effectively, you got to ask yourself, if I'm wrong, how bad would it be? If I'm right, how good would it be? If I'm right that this is something that would benefit you for us to talk about, for me to continue to push and not just take your self-report and act as though it's true. If I'm right about that, how beneficial would it be for me to do that thing? And if I'm wrong about that and I act that way, how bad would it be? And then vice versa. If I act as though it isn't beneficial or important, if I say, you're allowed to say however you want to say about self-report, even if I don't believe it, I'm just going to act as though it's true. If I'm right about that, that this is one that it's not a problem, and it's fine to be that way. If I'm right about that, how beneficial is that? If I'm wrong about that, how bad is that? And of those four scenarios, being wrong about the idea that it is good for me to push you on this thing that you're being inaccurate about your self-report, even if I am correct, even if it's true that you are angry, even though you're saying you're not, I'm accurately reading you as angry. If I think of it then as, and this is an instance in which it is good for me to push on that or act on that, even though it's different what they're saying. If I do that, even if I'm correct about the read, if I'm wrong that it's beneficial, that's a much bigger problem than if I act as though it's fine for you to lie about your self-report when it actually isn't. As a general rule, harming somebody means like making something worse for them. That being harmed means that as a result of whatever thing we're saying, this thing harmed me, that I am worse off in some way, that my status, my condition, my life is in a worse position than it was before the thing that harmed me. It's in a worse position as a result of that thing that harmed me. Something which fails to help you is not the same as something which harms you, right? Like if 0 is baseline and -10 is the worst and +10 is the best. If I'm at 0 and something harms me, it means that as a result of that, I'm at -1 or lower. If I'm at 0 and something fails to help me, then I stay at 0. A missed opportunity for help is not the same as the presence of harm. And so again, as a general rule, it's better if you have to take a gamble, right? If there's not clarity, as a general rule, it is better to risk failing to help someone than to risk hurting them. I hate saying that because that concept gets over applied. But I guess that's the truth with all these things, right? Like these things are true in certain contexts and we learn them in those contexts. And then we make the mistake of applying them in much more broad contexts where it's not true anymore. So right now I'm talking about like in a specific instance in which I have some reason to think that maybe you would benefit from me doing this thing that you don't want, and some reason to think that it would make things worse. You have to do your best to assess like what are the chances of each of those things. But when we're talking about a person's self-report, believing that, acting as though that person is telling the truth in their own self-report in that particular context, then I would very much say err on the side of failing to help, if that means not pushing on this thing. Err on the side of allowing them to decide what things they want you to know or talk about or address. In many, maybe even most, maybe even like every, honestly, I'd have to think about it. In many other categories, I would often, especially for someone like a therapist, whose job it is to help somebody, in most other contexts, I would say the opposite. I would say your job is to try to help. And if you're not certain, you still have to try. And if what you do ends up making it worse, then you have to do what you can to repair, fix that, improve that, and then move on. You can't just not do anything. So that's one of the things about the context is partly it's the responsibility, right? That if you and I are acquaintances, I was at my son's flag football game yesterday, right? If I'm saying, oh, hey, to one of the other parents that's there and they seem mad and they're like, how you doing? I'm like, I'm good. How are you? And they're like, I'm good. But they seem mad to me. Like, then I'm really, this didn't really happen. I don't want to like give the sense that, I'm sure that many people in Northbrook watch this stream and can speculate about who I might have been talking to. No, this didn't really happen. But I'm saying in that context, then like, yeah, it's not my role. It's not my place. I'm very much going to err on the side of like, no, whatever. They have no obligation to talk to me about the fact that they're mad, even if it's true that they are mad. And it's not my place to force them into a position of like, I can tell that you're mad or whatever. If a client is saying that to me, it's much more likely because of my role it's much more likely that I'm going to be saying, well, you seem as though you are. Again, we could talk about the more details about how I would specifically suggest people do that in therapy, but this is not a like how to do therapy stream. So let's save that for the people I actually supervise, I suppose. When you're talking to a friend, really, as a general rule, I would default to take them at their word. Act as though they're telling the truth, even if it seems different. Now, man, we'd have to talk about what I mean by responsibility for me to make sense of all this, but the context matters. And one of those things is like, how big of a deal is it, right? Like, I can think, this actually would be helpful if I'm like, really? Because you seem angry. But I might think like, it might be helpful, but even if it is, it's not like a huge deal. So it's not as worth trying. And then there's other times where it's like, ooh, if someone doesn't acknowledge that they're reading you as angry, this is going to be a big problem for you, then it's much more likely to be worth it. Another one of the factors that goes into that is, how likely is it that somebody else would do it? If I'm your only friend, if I'm closer to you than anybody else is, if we're married, I'm your spouse, I'm your partner, business partner, whatever. Like, if I'm the person with whom you are the closest, then like, if I'm not going to do this thing, it's not likely that other people are going to. And so that's more responsibility. If I'm your only friend that you would talk to, then definitely nobody else is going to do it. And it becomes that much more important. If you got a lot of other people that are closer to you than me, then like the chances that somebody else will do this helpful thing with you are a lot higher, and therefore it's less responsibility on me. If I'm not sure about someone's self-report and I want to engage more, I usually try to push very lightly, like a simple yeah or other non-intrusive question can give them the space to open up more if they're interested, and let them know that you're not just asking to be polite, but it also gives them an easy out if they just don't want to talk about it. Yeah, that's great. Giving people more opportunities. So I refer to things like that as an invitation. Invitations are, here is something that I am thinking you might care about or benefit from knowing or doing, right? Like in my estimation, this is something you either might want to be aware of or want to do, or something that you might benefit from doing, even if you don't want it. You might be aware of that. And you might not. So an invitation is, I'm just making you aware of this opportunity. Genuinely, I have no like preference. I'm not going to be happier if you take me up on it and more sad if you don't. I'm just offering it as, if this is of interest to you, if this is something you want to do, letting you know that it's an option and reminding you that you can do that or whatever. So that's what I would refer to something like that as an invitation, where you're just kind of giving them a second chance. Oh yeah, like now you have a second opportunity if you want to take it to say something a little bit more. And I agree with you, Bast Insider, that it also often conveys like no, I'm actually, like, especially in the context in which someone's like, how you doing? I'm good. How are you? I'm good. Because that kind of interaction, even if it's not those specific words, but that kind of quick back and forth, that's just a greeting. That's not like people sometimes complain about this, which I understand, but also is silly, that like people aren't really asking how you're doing. Like, yes, sometimes when people ask you how you're doing, they aren't actually asking how you're doing. They're just saying hello. It's just a way of saying, I am aware of your presence. I want to make sure that you're aware of my presence, and like, I'm either engaging in a conversation or offering an invitation for you, to letting you know that I'm open to a conversation if you want to have one or whatever. Even people, like, I genuinely am very interested in how people are doing. I still say how you doing as a way of just saying, hello, I am aware of you and we can engage in conversation or whatever. So in contexts like that, a follow-up, I'm good, yeah, or yeah, you're sure, whatever, like, can disrupt the pattern and make it clear, like, oh, even though what I was just saying was a greeting, I am now like offering, like, kind of repeating that question by just saying yeah, as a real question this time. offering them the invitation to be able to answer it as though it's an actual question. But even if that's not the case, even if it isn't interpreted that way, yeah, I think it's totally valid to use "how's it going" to not actually mean I want a full update on what's happening in your life. Sure. And even more than that, it's often like literally not a question at all. Like if we take this with a different version, not just like a full meaningful question, it's literally not all right, question. Something interesting is going on with my communication today, and I am tempted to sit and analyze it, but I'm not going to do that because that's not the point of what I'm trying to do here. Also, not generally helpful, even if it's pleasant. So take a different example, like, what's up? So a question to me, when we're talking about a question, is a statement that is intended to elicit information. There's information I am looking for, and so I am saying something to evoke that information being given to me. Obviously, there are other things that count as questions, like grammatically speaking. We often call those rhetorical questions. You know, when I'm asking a question, not because I'm actually seeking information, but in order to try and make a point or convey something or impact you in a certain way. Grammatically speaking, that's a question, but I'm using it for the purpose of rhetoric, you know, the way I am crafting this, you know, trying to have the impact or make the point that I'm trying to make. I know that could simplify what people think of rhetorical question as a question that's not meant to be answered. But truthfully, many questions that are meant to be answered are also still rhetorical. It's not just about whether it's meant to be answered. It's about whether the answer is because I'm looking for information, or if by making you answer this question, I am intending to impact you in a certain way. Like, I think I already know the answer to this question. I'm just trying to make you answer it in order to accomplish something that's still rhetorical. My bus driver often says, "How's it going?" when I'm getting on the bus, and I'm not going to answer with much more than a "going good" or "well, it's Monday, gosh darn Mondays," in the 5 seconds I have to get in the door. Yeah. In fact, a lot of like small talk gets a bad rap, but especially in a society the size of ours, where like we are all going to be in positions in which we are communicating with people that we don't know, have never met before, will never meet again. It's pretty useful, if not like vitally important, to have ways to be able to like indicate certain things. Yeah, man, I'm like, so I've talked about this on the stream before. Handshaking is something that since the development of germ theory, nobody would say like, how should we like greet random people that we've never met before? Oh, let's touch our hands together. You know, you think about like somebody running for political office that's just shaking like hundreds of hands a day. It's a ridiculous thing to do. It started from a different context in which people, A, weren't aware of germs, and B, were trying to solve a different problem. It started, there's a lot of this is about theorizing, right? There's not like clear documented record of how and why exactly, but given what we know, this is, I think, the most prevalent theory, at least one of them, is that travel used to be very dangerous. You know, like there weren't like roads. You know, the Roman Empire was built largely on the backs of having like well-built and monitored and maintained roads. Like roads are important. We take them for granted now. But it used to be that if you were traveling from your village to some other village a day's journey away, nobody knows what's going on with you out there on the road. There's no way to like have written ahead to the other people to even let them know to expect you. If you don't show up, they'll never know you were supposed to, and they won't be able to contact your friends and family back home and whatever and be like, hey, they never showed up. Like, just no one would know, right? So traveling was hugely dangerous. You're taking your life into your hands. And a lot of our stories and stuff still talk about bandits, highway bandits, and because that was a thing, because, you know, it's not like there's watchmen or whatever version of law enforcement that a particular culture had. It's just hanging out there all the time. Small talk is great. I think it's really important to have frequent low-stakes social interactions. I also think that it is very beneficial for a person to engage in that kind of interaction And agree also, in addition to it being beneficial and even enjoyable, also important to have the ability to do it. Yeah, I'm going into too much detail. The idea behind handshaking was that another person coming on the road, like we're talking about trusting people, could indicate to you that they mean you no harm, and so you let your guard down and let them pass, and you pass them. But then when they get close to you, they attack you, right? So if I am actually trying to attack you, I'd want to be closer, and I'd want to fool you into thinking that I'm not trying to attack you, so that you let me closer and let your guard down. Handshaking is a way of kind of backing that statement up. If I'm here actually trying to attack you, then it would be really silly for me to let you hold, especially my dominant hand, right? Like, am I going to pull a dagger in my offhand and try and stab you while you're holding onto the, I could, but it's not likely, right? If I was going to do that, I just wouldn't let you hold my hand in the first place. And in order for me to let you hold my hand, you have to let me hold your hand. So we're demonstrating mutual vulnerability. So it's a great solution for that scenario. Back then, small talk would not have been very beneficial. Like, when would you be having it, right? You're rarely ever running into people that are not like major figures in your life. Now, though, we live in a culture in which, yeah, whether it's your bus driver or the cashier at the store as you're checking out, or whomever, right? People that you're sitting next to on a bench at the park. I don't know, whatever. We want little ways to be able to communicate to other people about like what level of risk we are, what our intentions are. Small talk is just a way of saying, I mean you no harm, right? It'd be pretty weird to go up to somebody and be like, hey, I mean you no harm, just so you know. Most likely if someone was to say that, I'd be like, well, I didn't worry about that until you said that, right? But like in a large scale society where you're surrounded by people you don't know all the time, we have to rely on other things to try and make our assessments about who is safe, who can be trusted. There's been various different versions of trying to accommodate for this. Like when I grew up, maybe it's still a thing, but when I was growing up, there was this, I don't remember the name of the organization, but the mascot was Gruff McGruff. He's like this anthropomorphic dog in a like trench coat that I think was a police officer. And people could get little posters from that organization and put it in their window. And that was taught to us as kids. It's like, if you're in trouble, look for a house with this in the window. That means that they're a place that's like safe for kids to go, which I'll say, even at the time, struck me as strange, because if I was not a safe place for kids to go and I wanted kids to come anyway, then I would. But obviously, again, that's not the use case, right? Like, really, this isn't about like some of you are trying to entrap kids and might use this to various purposes. It's some of you are willing to like open a door and help out a kid, and some of you are not, either not willing or not able. And so it's not about like sussing out who's trying to harm kids. It's about sussing out like who's there and readily available. It's kind of like grinding rats in social. Hold on. I just had a pop-up block it. It's kind of like grinding rats in social interactions. Say good morning, +1 relationship. Help them move, +250. Well, so I have to get wrapping up soon, but I think this stuff is very interesting. And yes, I like that idea. We rely on all kinds of things to make our reads about people. And some of this stuff is pretty messed up, and we're aware of that, right? That like, I can say as a 6'5", like large, I'm not a very thin 6'5", brown man. Like, there are reasons that people might look at me when I'm coming up with, walking towards them on the street and worry that, now, do I think that's good? No, I don't think. Well, do I think that specific conclusion about me is beneficial to them? No, because I don't intend that. Do I think that's a good way to go about doing this in the specifics? No. But it is necessary that we have ways to try and be able to make our determinations about people. So the racism of it sucks, as well as many other ways in which people make judgments about a person. That we use like visual appearance and sound and all different kinds of things to try and suss out. It's it's unavoidable that people are going to, even if they're not trying to consciously, people are going to assess, like, is this someone I should be vigilant around or not? That doesn't mean that the way that people do it is great. But then we have all other, like, it's not just about whether you're man or the color of your skin. Those things are factors, but there are other factors too. The way that you dress sends cues. The way that you walk sends cues. The way that your hair is done, or your beard, or tattoos, or whatever, send cues. Again, doesn't mean that people will like get to accurate conclusions about those things, but they are data that people pick up on and use to draw conclusions. And there's a difference too between like drawing a conclusion as a conscious, like, I have come to a determination that this person is such and such, which is always inappropriate, versus like non-conscious, things that impact the way we think and feel or what we notice, which are often still inaccurate and can even be harmful. But that's the part that's like unavoidable. We want to modify it to be as good and helpful as possible, but we can't eliminate it completely. And it would be ridiculous for us to even try, because it is also useful to be like, like, that person's pointing a gun at me. I probably should avoid getting closer to them, right? Like, I'm trying to pick an obvious example, even though that person would be like, I wasn't doing that, whatever. Small talk is a social marker, right? It's a way of saying like, hey, you don't need to worry about me. Now, again, can that be weaponized by people who are like trying to ingratiate themselves in order to try and manipulate or whatever? Yes. But we read these things, right? And like, generally people have some, I'll say an experience that I'm willing to bet everyone can relate to, where you're talking to someone and they are doing like small talk things, but you can just tell you're getting some sense of like, this person's trying to sell me something. They want to like, whatever. Sometimes that's clearly indicated, people on the street trying to sell things or get donations for things or whatever. Yes, the classic avoid the pointed gun prejudice. Well, so prejudice is one of those words that obviously, like all things, language is living, it means what people use it to mean. But in its root, prejudice, to prejudge, to judge things prior to having the information necessary to like make what we would call a valid judgment. Just means like making judgments before having the information that you would need in order to have a very high level of accuracy on that judgment. And that, again, in that sense, that's not avoidable. Everybody does that all the time. The question though is about like the impact of that, the extent to which you consciously double down on and follow through with that, the extent to which even non-conscious actions that are impacted by that might cause harm or otherwise negative impact on other people. Because honestly, like even that example, and I was trying to, and I know you're joking on it too, I was trying to pick something like clearly, that people generally would agree, like, yeah, okay, it makes sense to do it. Even that thing has been used, including in some high profile cases, as justification, where then others are like, nah, you were like seeing something. Sometimes it's not a gun and somebody thinks that it is. Anyway. Yes, direct interaction is going to give you more information to draw conclusions on somebody than observing them from afar. And so small talk is kind of that. It's like saying, how you doing? I'm good, right? That's just a conversation starter. I sometimes think of it in terms of like, I don't know, there are certain video games where you get like dialogue choices. Somebody says something and you get to choose what you say in response. And sometimes these video games will do a thing where like there's 3 options, and in front of each of the options there's a word or a phrase in brackets where it'll be like aggressive, hey, get out of my face, pleasant, like, excuse me, can I pass, or whatever. And so I sometimes, hey Brandon, how are you doing today? I'm good. I genuinely, like, I'm having a pleasant day, but I am noticing as I've mentioned several times, something even there, I never like stumble on a word like that. Not never, but rarely. Something interesting going on with my communication, and I don't know why. But it's genuinely not like unpleasant or that I'm stressed out about a lot of stuff or anything like that. But it's interesting. And this is an example of what I'm talking about, because usually I would be able to go back to what I was saying pretty easily, and now I've forgotten what I was saying. What was I saying? Maybe I just haven't been getting enough sleep. Actually, I was sick a couple days ago. Well, I guess I still am on the tail end of it. That could be impacting things too. And I do also have some theories about this time of year and allergens and things like that. I'm doing better than I was now that we're chatting. Well, good. I'm glad. I will say there have been days where, like, getting ready to start the stream, +1 social interaction, where, like, as I'm starting the stream, I'm like, I don't want to do this today. And then as I get going, I enjoy it. Today wasn't that, but I'm enjoying it. I didn't start off in that place. I really forgot what I was saying, but maybe that's all right. I'm going to have to wrap up in a couple minutes anyway. Oh, yeah. I was saying that kind of like you just did in the parentheses there, +1 social interaction, right? That sometimes I think of these things as just like bracket greeting, you know, like whatever specific thing a person's saying, it just is intended to convey greeting, whether it's sup or how you doing or whatever. And I was saying earlier, things like sup or what's up or those ones aren't even treated as though they should be questions, right? Like some people will sometimes be like, people ask how you're doing, but they don't really mean it. I've never heard anyone complain that, like, people sometimes say what's up, but they don't really want to know what's up. Like, yeah, no, that's just a way, it's just a different version of saying hello, hi, right? Specifically, it's a version of it that invites interaction more, like a statement that's a hello or whatever. If I'm walking past somebody in a hall and I don't want to talk to them, so usually this is not something we like consciously decide, but every once in a while we have conscious awareness on this. If I'm about to pass someone in the hall and I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk to them, I would, if I'm going to choose something to say, I would either like not say anything because that minimizes the chances that they say something to me, or that if I do say something, I say like, hey, or good to see you, or whatever, you know, a statement that maybe they would respond with a similar statement, but it doesn't invite something. I wouldn't say, how's it going? Because even though we often say, how's it going? Good to see you. We'll just go on our separate ways. If a person, what's up might be a real question. Sup very, very rarely is, yeah. If a person does want to talk to me, saying, how's it going, conveys to them an indication that I'm like interested in or open to having a conversation. So it's greeting plus identifying some openness or willingness to talk further, where hello is just greeting. Or of course, there's lesser versions, the nod. There's a couple of different versions of the nod. Throwing a good, yo, what's up, yo? There's the nod that is, I think, generally thought of as like, obviously, I'm going to do two different nods here, and these nods are done for very many different reasons in very many different contexts. But some specific contexts, there's a nod that's thought of as like a masculine greeting, basically. Like, I am acknowledging that I am aware of your presence and that you are aware of my presence without stating anything, which is the, like, you know, the head down nod. Obviously, not only men use that, and people don't only use it for that purpose, it gets used in other ways, but that is something, a common purpose for it is a, you know, I see you, I'm acknowledging that you see me. That's like the least inviting possible way to do that. Maybe not the least, but, you know, on one side. There's a different one, which is, again, used by different people in different contexts, but one particular context in which it is commonly used is for people of color in environments that are predominantly white, to do the same thing. Like I see you, I acknowledge that you see me. Like we're um, recognizing each other, identifying, like we're here. You could flip them off. That's pretty uninviting. Joking. Yes, that's very uninviting. And there's a lot of options for stuff like that, which communicates not only so like we were saying before, 0 to positive 10 and to negative 10, right? Like the 0 in terms of like how willing am I to engage with you is nothing at all, right? Like basically acting as though I could do everything I'm doing if I didn't even know you were here, right? I just keep walking past you with no acknowledgement at all. Now, depending on the context, in some cases that's like seems very deliberate, and whenever it seems deliberate, whenever it's like, no, I know you see me, but you're pretending not to, then it's on the negative side where it's like, I don't want to talk. I would pay a cost in order to avoid talking with you. Flipping somebody off would be on that negative side, right? Like I would prefer not interacting with you over interacting with you. Where the nod thing I'm talking about is like a 1. It's a way of acknowledging that we're present and like that we have some kind of connection or relationship or whatever, awareness of one another in the minimal possible way of openness to further communication. So it's like that's what a lot of small talk is. It's like a 1 or a 2. It's a minimal way of inviting things. And yeah, small talk is often very much just like a brackets, you don't have to fear me. Now we can move into the rest of the conversation. I'm nice, whatever. All right, I do gotta get going. I'm gonna pay attention. Also, my throat is starting to hurt from talking, which isn't usual. Maybe I am more sick still than I realized. Because it's a bit off today. It's interesting. Not off as in bad. I know that often gets used euphemistically to mean like I'm feeling badly or doing badly, but off genuinely is like it seems different to me than I'm used to. I wonder what's going on. My bus driver and I have developed a very good system where we have time for one passing remark or minor joke per day, and sometimes a passing remark on, "Hey, I didn't see you yesterday." Sick. Yeah, I definitely had a very minor cold. Like I woke up Friday with like a minor cough, but mostly fine. And then Saturday, like a little achy and scaled back my activities a bit. But then yesterday was, still a little bit of a cough, but feeling much better. And today I was feeling fine, but my throat is hurting from talking, which doesn't usually happen. So maybe have to pay attention. But I have to go now anyway. So good to be with you. Thank you, Bast Insider, for chatting. I hope you feel better soon. Thank you. I will be back next week, same time, same place. Good to be with you all. Be well.